Some betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people you trust the most, the ones who should protect your dreams instead of crushing them. I thought I had finally built something of my own, something earned through sweat and sleepless nights. But in a single moment, it was taken from me, sold off as if my years of sacrifice were nothing more than loose change on the table. That night, staring at the empty space where my dream once stood, I made a promise. If they thought I would stay silent, they were about to learn otherwise. I was never the kind of guy who had things handed to him. From the moment I turned 16, I knew that if I wanted anything in life, I would have to earn it with my own hands. While my friends spent their evenings hanging out at malls or glued to their video games, I was stacking shelves in a grocery store, sweeping floors at the gas station, and later delivering food until midnight on weekends. Every dollar felt like a step closer to something bigger, something I could call mine. I didn't just want a car. I wanted my car, the one I had dreamed about since I was a kid. It wasn't about the glossy paint or the sound of the engine alone, though those things thrilled me. It was about what that car stood for: independence, freedom. Proof that all the late nights, the aching feet, and the times I skipped outings because I couldn't afford both gas money and fun were worth it. For years, I carried that picture in my head, whispering promises to myself while scrubbing dishes or handing change across a counter. One day, I'll have it. The day finally came when I slid the key into the ignition of my dream car. My hands trembled as the engine roared to life, that deep, steady hum echoing in my chest like a heartbeat. I can still remember the way the sunlight danced on the hood, the faint smell of leather inside, and how for the first time, I felt completely in control of my own life. It wasn't just a car, it was the reward for years of sacrifice, a symbol of freedom parked in the driveway, whispering to me that I had finally made it on my own terms. My family was never simple to understand. On the surface, we looked ordinary enough. 2 parents, 2 kids, a modest home in a quiet neighborhood. But inside those walls, it was like living under a spotlight that only ever shone on one person: my younger sister Emily. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If she brought home average grades, my parents praised her for trying her best. If she forgot chores, they excused her with a smile. But when it came to me, nothing was ever enough. An A on an exam was met with, "Why not an A, sis?" Coming home exhausted from work earned me a lecture about family responsibility. It was as if everything I did faded into the background, while Emily's smallest efforts were celebrated like victories. The favoritism was subtle at first, but it grew sharper as we got older. Emily had this way of curling her words sweetly around our parents, turning even her mistakes into stories of misfortune that they just had to rescue her from. And they always did. Paying off her late fees, replacing the phone she lost for the 3rd time, smoothing over the wreckage she left behind. I'd watch it all unfold from the corner of the room, biting my tongue, wondering how blind they could be. I still remember one evening when I came home drenched from a double shift. Emily was sprawled across the couch, whining about needing money for a last-minute school project. My mom turned to me without hesitation. "Can't you help your sister out? You're so good at saving." I just stared, the words catching in my throat, because all I wanted to ask was, when has she ever helped me? But instead, I stayed quiet, swallowed my anger, and let them see what they wanted to see: a dependable son they could lean on, and a daughter they could never deny. Every time I looked at my car, I felt a rush of pride that words barely touched. It wasn't just metal wheels and an engine. It was years of sweat and sacrifice wrapped in steel. The glossy paint shimmered under the sun, a deep shade that seemed to hold every late night and early morning I'd endured. When I ran my hand across the hood, I remembered the blisters from hauling boxes, the long hours bent over sinks washing dishes, the sting of rejection when people laughed at my cheap clothes because I couldn't afford better. All of that lived inside the car, and that's why it was more than transportation. It was proof that no one could ever say I didn't work for what I wanted. When I slid into the driver's seat, the world outside dimmed. The faint smell of leather wrapped around me like a reward, and the low growl of the engine sent chills down my spine. For the first time, I wasn't dependent on anyone. Not buses that ran late, not rides begged from friends, and certainly not my parents' approval. Behind that wheel, I was free. I could drive with the windows down, the wind tearing through my hair, the streets unrolling before me like they belonged to me alone. I'd catch glimpses of my reflection in shop windows as I passed, and I could hardly believe it was me. That tired, overworked boy now looked like someone who had made it. People noticed too. Friends who used to pity me now asked for rides, their voices tinged with admiration. Even strangers turned their heads. Every rev of the engine reminded me I wasn't invisible, not anymore. That car wasn't just mine, it was me, alive in a way I'd never felt before. Emily had a talent for chaos, and not the kind that could be excused as youthful mistakes. Her life was a trail of half-finished promises and broken responsibilities, each one patched up by my parents, as if she were some fragile glass doll. She had credit cards she maxed out without a second thought, clothes spilling from her closet with the tags still dangling, and a new phone almost every year because she'd either lose it or accidentally break it. Yet somehow, instead of being scolded, she was comforted. I'd watch from across the dinner table as she spun stories with watery eyes, talking about how hard school was or how unfair life seemed to her, and I could see my parents melt every single time. Meanwhile, I was the one footing invisible bills, not in cash but in sacrifice. When she needed gas money, my father would casually say, "Can't you spot your sister a little? You're good at saving." If she overspent on shopping, my mother would sigh and remark, "She's just young, she'll learn. Don't be so hard on her." It was infuriating, this endless cycle where she never learned because she never had to. I'll never forget one night I walked in after another grueling double shift. Emily was on the phone, laughing loudly, showing off a brand new purse she couldn't afford. My parents sat nearby, smiling like proud spectators, as if she'd just accomplished something worth celebrating. I stood there, sweaty uniform clinging to me, aching for even a word of acknowledgement for all I did, and got nothing. Not a nod, not a smile, just silence. And in that silence, I felt the divide deepen. The line drawn between the daughter who could do no wrong and the son who could never be enough. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that starts off quietly, giving no warning of the storm it carries. I came home from work, my hands still smelling faintly of grease from the shop, expecting to see my car parked neatly in the driveway like always. But the space was empty. For a moment I thought I'd made some mistake, that maybe I'd parked it further down the street in a rush that morning. I walked up and down the block, my heart thumping harder with every step, but the truth sank in like ice through my veins. My dream car was gone. I stormed inside, confusion sharp in my voice. "Where's my car? Did one of you move it?" My parents sat at the kitchen table, their faces calm, too calm, like they'd rehearsed something. My mother folded her hands, avoiding my eyes. My father finally spoke. "We had to sell it. Your sister was in trouble, and we needed the money." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "You what?" My voice cracked, the disbelief spilling out before the anger had time to catch fire. Emily sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. She smirked when she saw me, and that smirk told me everything she knew. She'd been part of this. "You sold my car, the one I worked years for." I was shouting now, but they didn't flinch. My father's voice was stern, almost condescending. "It was a family decision. Your sister owed money. We couldn't let her sink. You're young. You'll understand one day." I stood frozen, heat rushing through my chest, fists trembling at my sides. In that moment, it wasn't just a car they had taken from me. It was every hour I had bled into building a life of my own, and they had tossed it away like it meant nothing. I remember standing in my room that night, the walls pressing in around me, my chest hollow as if someone had ripped the air out of my lungs. The realization sank deeper with every second. My car was gone, sold off without my consent, as if my blood and sweat had no value at all. I replayed the years in my head, every greasy apron I'd worn, every coin I'd counted at the end of a shift, every time I'd said no to fun because I was saving for something greater. All of it had been reduced to a handful of cash my sister had burned through like dry leaves in a fire. When I confronted her again, she didn't even bother hiding her smugness. "Relax," Emily said, twirling her hair, her phone glowing in her hand. "It's just a car. You'll get another one. I needed help more than you needed a shiny toy." Those words cut deeper than she knew. To her it was a toy, to me it was everything. I turned to my parents, desperate for them to see my pain. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? That car wasn't just a car, it was my life." My mother sighed as though I were being dramatic. "You're young. You can always earn again, but family comes first. a family. The word stung bitterly, because in that house, family seemed to mean Emily and Emily alone. My father muttered something about me being selfish, and suddenly it felt like I was the villain for daring to care about the only thing I had truly earned. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with a mix of grief and rage. The shock had settled into something sharper, something heavier. I realized I wasn't just mourning the loss of a car. I was mourning the trust I thought I had in the people who claimed to love me, and that betrayal burned hotter than anything I'd ever felt. The house became a battlefield where every word cut deeper than the last. I couldn't keep the anger bottled up anymore. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, I finally let it spill. "Do you even realize what you've done to me?" My voice shook, not from fear, but from the storm I'd been holding back. Forks froze midway, the air turning heavy. My father slammed his hand on the table, his tone sharp. "Watch your tone. We did what was necessary. You'll thank us one day when you understand what family sacrifice means." Family sacrifice. The words echoed in my head like poison. Whose sacrifice? Certainly not Emily's. She sat there smirking, tapping her nails against her phone screen, pretending to be bored. I turned to her, my eyes burning. "You don't even care, do you? You let them take everything I worked for, just so you could cover another one of your screw-ups." She finally looked up, her lips curling. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like you lost a limb. It was just a car. Just a car." I could feel the blood rush to my face, my fist tightening under the table. My mother reached over, her voice drenched in irritation. "Stop this nonsense. You're making your sister feel guilty. She didn't ask for your help. We offered it." Guilty. Emily didn't look guilty at all. She looked victorious, like she'd won again, shielded by the armor of parental favoritism. I stared at the three of them, feeling a cold weight settle in my chest. They weren't hearing me, they never had. To them, my pain was selfishness. My anger disrespect, my hard work disposable. That night something inside me shifted. The betrayal was complete, and with it came the clarity that nothing would ever be the same again. After that night, I stopped yelling. I stopped arguing, stopped trying to make them see me. On the surface, I went quiet, moving through the house like a ghost, answering in clipped words, keeping my head down. My parents mistook it for acceptance, maybe even maturity. Emily thought she had won, parading around with her smug little grin, tossing her hair like the queen of the household. What none of them noticed was that silence had become my shield and my weapon. I lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind no longer clouded by shock but sharpened by focus. Rage, when left unchecked, burns out quickly. But rage with direction, that becomes something else entirely. I replayed their words again and again. Family sacrifice. You'll thank us one day, just a car. Each syllable became a nail hammered into my resolve. They had taken everything I worked for, brushed aside my pain like it was nothing. If they thought I would simply swallow that, they were wrong. In the mornings I played the part. I left for work, came home, nodded through their empty conversations. Inside, though, I was drawing plans in my head, building them piece by piece. Revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be a sudden explosion. No, it was going to be quiet, precise, and undeniable. I wanted Emily to feel the weight of every cent she had stolen from me. I wanted my parents to watch her crumble under the very shield they had raised to protect her. Each time I passed the empty spot in the driveway, the fire inside me grew hotter. They had erased my car, but in doing so, they had carved out something far more dangerous. They had awakened a version of me that would no longer forgive, no longer forget. I started watching her closely, not in the way a brother watches a sister, but like a hunter studying prey. Emily's patterns were predictable, almost laughably so. She lived for instant gratification, and that was the very weakness I could use against her. Every morning, she'd leave the house with her designer bag, half paid for with my stolen sacrifice, and return late at night with new clothes, new shoes, and stories about nights out she couldn't afford. She thought she was untouchable, that our parents' blind loyalty would always protect her. That arrogance was the crack I needed. Quietly, I began keeping track. I noted the dates, the receipts she carelessly left crumpled in the trash, the whispered phone calls she thought no one overheard. I watched her borrow money from friends, making promises she'd never keep. I even followed her once, lingering in the shadows of a parking lot as she handed cash to a guy leaning against his car, her voice trembling while she said, "This is the last time. I swear. It wasn't the last time. It never was. I created a file, neat and organized, every reckless action lined up like evidence in a trial. Credit card statements she left on the counter. Bank alerts flashing on her phone screen, even screenshots of her social media posts, flaunting luxuries she had no right to afford. Each piece fit into a puzzle that would one day corner her completely. No one suspected a thing. To my parents, I was just their quiet son again, finally over it. To Emily, I was invisible, the background noise she didn't care to notice. But behind that calm exterior, I was building something stronger than anger. I was building a case, one she wouldn't be able to laugh her way out of. The deeper I dug, the more the truth began to rot beneath the surface. At first, I thought the car had been sold to clear some urgent debt, something that had forced my parents' hand. But then I found the crack in Emily's story, and through it, everything unraveled. One evening while she was out, I slipped into her room. It wasn't guilt that pushed me. It was the gnawing suspicion that something wasn't adding up. Her purse lay tossed on the bed, carelessly unzipped. Inside, buried beneath makeup kits and crumpled receipts, I found a thick envelope of cash. My hands trembled as I opened it, the bills stacked neatly, far more than someone drowning in debt should have. My breath caught. This wasn't desperation. This was greed. Later I overheard her on the phone, her laughter light and carefree. Yeah, I told them it was all debt. Idiots believed me. Can you imagine? Sold his precious car, and I still had enough to grab the new iPhone. Easiest money I've ever made. She didn't know I was standing in the hallway, her words slicing through me like glass. The betrayal hit harder than the first time. It wasn't just that she'd taken my car. It was that she had pocketed the money, lied about the amount, and played my parents like fools. And they defended her, stood against me, all while she pocketed the reward. That night, staring at the envelope I'd stolen from her bag, the rage inside me solidified into something colder. This wasn't about payback anymore. This was about exposing her, tearing off the mask she wore so easily, and making sure every cent she had stolen was dragged out into the light. She thought she was clever. She thought she'd won. She had no idea the game had only just begun. Emily's weakness wasn't just her spending. It was her belief that everyone around her would always clean up her mess. That blind confidence was the weapon I planned to use against her. The first time she came knocking on my door, it was almost too easy. She leaned against the frame, chewing her lip, pretending to be embarrassed. Hey, I just need a little cash. I'll pay you back next week, promise. In the past, I would have laughed bitterly and slammed the door, but this time I nodded slowly, hiding the satisfaction curling inside me. Fine, but I need it in writing. She blinked at me, confused, then scoffed. Seriously, I'm your sister. Don't you trust me? I shrugged, keeping my tone calm. It's just how I do things now. If you're planning to pay me back, you shouldn't care. Her pride wrestled with her desperation, but in the end, desperation won. She signed the first slip of paper, a simple IOU with her name scrawled across it. It became a pattern. She'd come to me whispering excuses. Her card declined, her friend wouldn't spot her again. She had to cover emergencies that sounded suspiciously like shopping trips and club entries. Each time, I handed over small sums, never enough to raise suspicion, but always with the same requirement: her signature. The date, the exact amount. She rolled her eyes, muttered under her breath, but she signed them all. I kept every paper tucked safely away in a folder, each one a nail tightening her coffin. She thought I was being weird, maybe even obsessive, but harmless. To her, I was still the brother she could manipulate. To me, she was already trapped in a cage she didn't even see. And with every cent she borrowed, the walls closed in tighter. The timing had to be perfect, and I chose the night of my mother's birthday dinner. The house was full of relatives, laughter echoing through the walls, plates clinking, everyone basking in the glow of celebration. Emily, as usual, was in the center of it all, showing off a new necklace that I knew she couldn't possibly afford. My parents beamed at her as though she were royalty, their pride blind as ever. I sat quietly, sipping my drink, the folder resting against my leg under the table, heavy with weeks of evidence. When the chatter reached its peak, I stood. My voice was calm, almost too calm. I have something to share with everyone tonight. The room hushed, curious eyes turning toward me. My parents exchanged puzzled glances, but Emily's smirk never faltered. I laid the first paper on the table, a signed IOU with Emily's name scrawled across it. This, I said evenly, is the first loan I gave my sister. She promised to pay me back. I slid out another, then another, the stack growing higher, the whispers spreading like wildfire across the table. Emily's smile wavered. "What are you doing?" She hissed, her cheeks flushing. I ignored her and kept going. She borrowed again and again. Each time she signed, each time she lied. And when my car was sold, when my years of work were stolen, she didn't just take it for debt. She kept a good portion of the money for herself. Here's the proof. Gasps filled the room as I revealed the receipts, the screenshots, the notes. My parents' faces drained of color, their precious daughter exposed before the very people they'd boasted to for years. Emily slammed her hand on the table, stammering, "You can't. This isn't." But the evidence spoke louder than her excuses. For the first time, she had nowhere to hide, and the silence that followed was heavier than any judgment I could deliver. The room crackled with tension, every eye darting between Emily and me, the neat stack of papers sitting like a pile of stones on her chest. She tried to laugh it off, her voice shrill. "This is ridiculous. He's making it all up." But her signature stared back from every page, undeniable, permanent. I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut. "You owe me. Not just the money from these loans, but the car too. Every cent of it. And this time you won't be rescued." My father opened his mouth, ready to thunder some defense, but I didn't give him the chance. I pulled out the final sheet, an itemized tally of every dollar she'd ever taken, with interest calculated down to the penny. "This is the total. You either pay me back, or I take these papers to court. And trust me, I will." Emily's face drained of color, her lips parting soundlessly as the weight of it finally hit her. For once, her charm, her crocodile tears, her practiced excuses, none of it worked. My mother reached for the papers with trembling hands, scanning them, her eyes widening with each line. The silence from the relatives watching was suffocating, their judgment falling heavier than any words could. "You can't do this to me," Emily whispered, her voice cracking, a hint of desperation leaking through. I stood tall, my chest burning with years of swallowed rage finally finding release. "I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself." From that night on, the safety net was cut. My parents, humiliated in front of family, couldn't shield her anymore without looking like fools. Emily had no choice but to find work, real work, dragging herself out of bed at dawn, stumbling home exhausted, finally paying for every stolen cent. The taste of revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was in watching her crumble under the very weight she had piled onto me, and knowing there was no escape this time. The shift in the house was almost tangible, as if someone had ripped the mask off and forced everyone to see the truth they'd spent years ignoring. Emily no longer strutted around in new outfits or boasted about nights out with friends. Instead, she dragged herself home in cheap uniforms, her hair pulled back, her hands raw from actual labor. The girl who once sneered at responsibility now stumbled through it every day. Her complaints met not with sympathy but with silence. I would hear her slam her bedroom door at night, muffled sobs bleeding through the walls. And instead of pity, I felt a dark, quiet satisfaction. My parents had changed too. Their lectures had vanished, replaced by uneasy glances whenever I walked into the room. My father avoided my eyes. My mother's voice softened in a way it never had before, as though they finally understood the depth of the wound they'd carved into me. It wasn't an apology. I doubted they had the courage for that, but it was something. Respect, however reluctant, had found its way into their silence. One evening, as Emily sat at the table counting crumpled bills to hand me, her face flushed with humiliation, I leaned back in my chair and simply watched. Every coin, every note she pushed toward me was another piece of justice reclaimed. She couldn't meet my gaze, and for once, I didn't care to force it. She was learning the lesson the hard way, the only way she ever could. The balance had shifted, and I could feel it in my bones. I didn't need their praise or apologies anymore. What I had was better. The undeniable proof that I wasn't invisible, that every cent I had bled for mattered. And now, finally, they all knew it too. The day the final payment landed in my hand, it didn't feel like victory at first. It felt quiet. Emily slid the last bundle of notes across the table without a word, her face pale, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. She didn't look at me, and I didn't ask her to. My parents hovered nearby, their silence heavier than any lecture they'd ever thrown at me. For a long moment, no one moved, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then I counted the money slowly, each note slapping against the table like a drumbeat of finality. When I reached the end, I looked up and met their eyes one by one. "This," I said softly, "holding up the stack, is what respect costs, and every cent is worth more than your excuses ever were." My father flinched, my mother looked away, and Emily's shoulders trembled as if the weight of her pride had finally collapsed. Later that night, I slipped into my car, the car that had been at the center of everything. The engine purred to life beneath my hands, steady and strong, as if it had been waiting all along for this moment. I drove through the empty streets, the wind rushing against my face, the city lights blurring past. It wasn't just a drive, it was freedom, it was proof, it was mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry anymore. The bitterness had burned itself out, leaving something sharper, cleaner in its place. I didn't need revenge to define me anymore. I had already carved my worth into their lives in a way they would never forget. The scars of this story belonged to all of us, but the triumph, quiet, undeniable, belonged only to me. And so it ended, not with shouting, not with chaos, but with a silence that carried more weight than any words ever could. My sister had repaid every cent. My parents had watched their pride wither, and I had reclaimed the dignity they once stripped away from me. The car was more than metal and wheels now. It was the proof of my endurance. The monument to years of sacrifice and betrayal turned into justice. They would never look at me the same again, and that was enough. In the end, revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about making them finally see